of them included the department request, and that was the manager actually, Mr. Antonin brought forward a budget at a 7% increase, so that would be the 2010 department request. So those were the maximum requests. And then with the revisions that were needed to get down to the final budget, and that is the 5% request, would be the manager recommended. So the final column is the one that we're dealing with, but the other two columns are for your information and provided as we proceeded through the process. So, Council, all of the presentations by the department heads will be for the final column under 2010 manager recommended. So, with that, if we can go to the overhead, my presentation this evening will be about the executive and the legislative programs. Just run through it fairly quickly, but the overall program for the executive budget, this is for the city manager, the HR, and the legal programs. These will see a decrease of 1.7%. Administrative costs, we have that for accounting for the city manager, and 4/10 of my time as the assistant city manager. I have the multiple duties, so only 40% of my actual salary is accounted for in this budget. The remainder in Public Works, split between the administration within Public Works, as Mr. Thompson talked about earlier in his presentation, and then also in the sanitary sewer fund, since as the Public Works Director, I'm in effect the executive that reports to Mr. Antonin in charge of sanitary sewers. So I'm accounted for in 3 different accounts throughout the budget. Human Resources, this particular program has, again, a slight decrease, 1.5%. Would note that our HR attorney is covered under legal. This is Mr. Bethel. It says 50% in effect. If you're not aware, we do have 1,040 hours contracted with Mr. Bethel, which is in effect a half-time person. I know we get more hours out of him than that, but that is what we're contracted for, but it's not accounted for in Human Resources. It's accounted for under legal. Note that in 2010, we will be negotiating all labor contracts, so it will be a fairly large year. Mr. Bethel and I negotiated the most recent contracts as city manager, but that will be a large task given where we are. We also see healthcare costs. That will be a large contract issue. We're trying to establish healthcare costs for next year. Just nationally, obviously, healthcare costs continue to increase as they do for the city of Maplewood. We saw a fairly large switch over to our high deductible plan and seeing the benefits of that. The numbers are astounding to see the difference between what employees incur for costs to Medica this year versus those that aren't on that plan. It's nearly a 2-to-1 cost. I think the employee cost per month is like $485 for those not on a high deductible and $265 per month for those on the high deductible plan. So it really is saving us significant dollars in the bids, and bids are going out, but even with that, our costs will continue to rise. And finally, we are, as you know, with the reductions in staff, we did that through early retirement. We may come back. That was a very successful program. It was a win-win for both the employees and the city, and that may be another option for consideration through the HR in 2010. The next program is one that accounts for Mr. Cantrud and Mr. Bethel. It shows a decrease of 9.8%. That doesn't certainly mean that the attorney costs are there. Our city attorney costs, we have not negotiated a contract with Mr. Cantrud for next year, but we are budgeted to remain steady at costs. So the one thing that we are providing, both our HR attorney and our city attorney, both of them now office at City Hall, and we do charge them rent. And Mr. Cantrud actually has a full-time employee who has a space in finance, and certainly works there. That, I think all the staff would agree that that works well to have Mr. Cantrud in the building all the time and available, and so he does pay rent for his office. We do charge him for paper and administrative expenses as well. So we do have that in the budget. HR attorney, obviously, again, remaining steady, again, a contract that has not been set for 2010. What we are budgeting, our fees back, you will note that fees for services in effect, which is what Mr. Cantrud and Mr. Bethel are, a savings of $30,000. Yes?
I pushed the button and I didn't know why she didn't respond with the light down there. Chuck, could you, I'm not sure that I'm clear where the money for the HR attorney is actually coming out of. I know that you've explained it. Could you do it one more time, please?
I will. If you, well, let's see if I can find the correct page here. I believe it is. I'm going to go to page, well, I'm certainly turning quickly. How about page 33 of 69 in our packet for the work session? You'll see this is the program that we call legal services. This particular, you can see the line item calls 4480 fees for services. That is how we budget for Mr. Bethel and Mr. Cantrud. So you will see that our original budget in 2008 was $210,987,000. Well, our budget for 09 increased by $30,000, assuming an increase in expenses, but by providing the rent and the space and actually memberships at the MCC for both Mr. Cantrud and Mr. Bethel, we're able to hold the line on expenses. So instead of having an increase, we're holding the line with 2008. So we'll have a savings in 09 and expecting to hold those expenses the same in 2010.
Thank you.
The second savings is also on this page. We are seeing a slight reduction in the judgments and losses. And this is where the expenses for litigation occur. And if you want to look on that page 33, again, 4970 is our judgments and losses as costs have incurred from 07. The very large increase in 08 with the litigation that was ongoing from 06 and 07, and those that were resolved and paid off. And in 09, we had a $220,000 budget. We're recommending reducing that by $15,000 because we are seeing a reduction in the number and the expense of our litigation.
Mr. Nephew has a question.
Yeah, just first a little clarification on that. How or when are those expenses booked relative to the progress of litigation? So, for example, is it after a case is completely resolved that then we have our deductibles, or is it something that we tend to pay along the way as things are in process, or how does that work, especially with respect to deductibles and insurance terms and all that kind of stuff?
Council, we receive invoices from the League of Minnesota Trust on an ongoing basis for the attorney costs as they ongo. So when Robin appears on the Wipers case, we're paying for a portion of that, and some of it's litigated. However, a majority of the expenses we don't see until the end of the project. So we may see some ongoing costs, but a majority of them are not till the matter is resolved, and then we will get that invoice and have to pay for that. So I don't know, Mr. Cantrud may want to add to that as well.
Acting Mayor and Council, I would simply add by suggesting that the way the league books that against us is the year of the experience. So in terms of the only matter I think that the league's really taking care of us heavily on right now is the Patty Gearing case. And so that would have been initiated in, I believe it was 2008, so that would actually be booked as a 2008 claim. I believe we've surpassed our deductible on the matter, so the rest is essentially booked against the league instead of against the city. And, without having much more experience, I would also defer to your city manager, who's got much more experience with the league and how they handle claims to supplement that answer. But that's what I know about the matter right now.
Yeah, the league takes and books it as the estimated cost of what the we think the claim's going to be, and then they reserve a dollar amount on a yearly basis that they review it. And so, such as the ongoing wipers case, we've reached our stop loss numbers, and so basically that should, other than there are incidental things that come up that are charged to us, such as filings and different things like that that are not perhaps covered by the insurance. But for the most part, I believe all our major claims now have been settled except for perhaps one, and that, as I mentioned in my briefly noted this week, that with a couple of favorable judgments that there is some optimism that we may prevail on summary judgment on both the civil and perhaps criminal case. So once that's done, knock on wood, we may get back to order, and I'm very hopeful next year that we will not have the surcharge that the league has placed upon the city of Maplewood for the last few years because of the high claims to ratio.
A follow-up question on that. So in the example of that one major piece of ongoing litigation, we have a $50,000 deductible for that. So the expenses have run past the $50,000.
That's correct.
Have we booked that $50,000 as an expense already, or is that something that, I mean, so like as we're looking at the expended amounts in the budget, is that a 2009 expense because it's been these invoices along the way, or is it something that we'll have as a future expense when they give us a bill after it's all wrapped up?
Members of the council, that is actually will be booked against, we carry over unused budget for those legal claims. We have $200,000 each year that we budget for it. Mm-hmm. And so this will go against 2008 expenses.
So, if I might, I think where we are in that case, the $50,000 exposure, we bill that into the books even though we may not have that billed from the league. And then
Okay.
if we don't get the invoice, it shows as an expense. So we'll use
Okay.
this allocation of money for that, so we're not carrying it forward every year.
Okay,
But
so
in
that-
effect, we carry it forward every year.
Right, so that was effectively recorded on an accrual-type basis. I mean, I know we
Yes.
have a modified accrual, but that would have been recorded as a 2008 accrual.
Correct.
So the numbers, looking at, to some extent, 2009, I suppose we have a pretty clear idea of what our actual litigation costs have been in 2009. As far as new claims, there haven't been a whole lot on the major side there, I suppose. But 2010, then, that's all just an estimate or a projection of contingency for potential expenses. That doesn't reflect any suit that we currently are engaged in or aware of or anything like that. It's just a bookmark guesstimate to make sure we're covered.
Acting Mayor and Council, again, that's the reason it's at the $200,000 is simply because we have that obligation potential against us. That's our maximum. And so that's our exposure. We want to budget that, and because we are, as we've said, we're budgeting very tight. We don't have a large fund balance. This really is a contingency account per se. Certainly, we hope to be much less than that and get back into the other levels. But we do have other judgments and losses during the year for various small claims, whether someone hits a manhole or you know,
Right.
some
A
slight
sewer
other
backup
claims.
or
And so,
anything
you know, we'll
like that.
incur those costs during the
Yeah.
year.
Thank you.
Okay? We can go back to the overhead. I think that's the legal program. We also have a safety program. This is the same as 2009, just within $80. I would note that we did make a revision last year where we did try to do some of this work through staff. We had a fairly large safety program. It got cut back. Last year, we tried to institute some of the importance of our safety citywide, and Mr. Bethel is now leading up our safety committee, and so trying to